Nå A-laget samlet på scenen, som dere ser, og vi skal ha en paneldebatt, og det da Tore Dag som skal lede den, og så blir jeg siddende på siden og madende med spørsmål, hvis det kommer flere spørsmål inn på Menti. Så Tore Dag, ordet ditt.
Tusen takk skal du ha. Det jo litt av en gjeng, og jeg tenker at dagen har vært så rik frem til nå, så om det skulle gå helt galt nå, så ikke det så farlig. Så det min lille beroligende motto her. Jeg jobber jo ved UiA, så jeg tror jeg tar anledning til å snike inn bitte grann reklame for UiA. Vi har... Sorry, I switch into English. So, I'm from the University of Agder, so I take the opportunity to a bit commercial for our university. We have actually taken in a PTMF framework in our education and training. And I want to mention in particular two courses that we have. One of them is recovery and collaboration in social networks. There we also introduce this framework as one of the perspectives. We also have a fresh new course starting this autumn is open dialogue. And you even mentioned open dialogue as one approach that is very in line with this thinking. And that's also starting from this autumn. So that was the commercial for the courses that we have at the university. I will come back with perhaps some comments on open dialogue if that will suit afterwards. But I will now introduce, you have heard many of these and seen their faces, but there should be 3 new faces here and persons and voices. So I would like to try and introduce them and give them the word. So first, let me have my glasses on. Here is Ingrid Heimark. She works now as a nurse in care for elderly, but she has also published several papers based on her own experience with mental health difficulties. And we also use her in our education and training at the University of Agder. So she is a very important voice based on her own experience. So thank you for coming. Then we have Tor Jones. Yes, he works as the head of an activity center in mental health. I think it's now called Energiverket, Energy Factory, or something like that. And in Kristiansand, doing very exciting work there, but you also have a long experience in various parts of the mental health services. So thank you for coming. And then we have Trond, you know, but then we have Kristine Dahl Sørensen. She's a psychologist specialist. She holds a PhD in mental health care and works as many things in District Psychiatric Center of Austre Agder. So she works as a researcher. She works with developing the practice there, and she's also a team manager for clinicians. And Kristine Dahl Sørensen, she has also been part of the PTMF forum that we call it. So you have been part of the group behind this day. So what I would start with is to give the word to them. And I don't give you any specific questions, just if you would like to comment on the theme of the day, based on what you have thought of before even this day, or if you want to pick up on something that has been said that particularly you have noticed during the day. So could we start with you, Tor? Okay. I think we take Tor, Kristine, and then Ingrid closest to me here.
Okay. Does this work? Yes? Well, first of all, I would just like to say this has been kind of overwhelming because especially what you have given us, Lucy, is something that is very uplifting to hear and very inspiring. And it is, in a way, something that I have always thought about. It's like it's logical. It's like a way of thinking that I have been surprised that not more people have thought of or used. It's because there's, in our field, psychic health or psychiatry, there's a lot of common nonsense. There is always some common sense. But what you have developed is what I would call uncommon sense. It is like a system that is very encompassing. It's sort of makes sense in a broad way. And also, when I heard you speak, I was thinking this is very, very, very political. And health professionals are not likely to engage in the social discussions or political discussions in society at large. And that is, I think, is a problem, because we know things that politicians should hear. We cannot stay neutral when the framework of society is deteriorating in a way that will have implications for people. So I think it's very inspiring. I think we as health professionals, we should write articles, essay, participate in debates, etc., because we are absent. We are absent, and we should not be.
Could I just add one question too? Do you have any, how do you say, picture of how this could influence the work you're doing in your position in this center in the municipality of Kristiansand? I haven't prepared you for this.
Well, I don't know. You know, what we do at the place where I work is very much what the kind of work that your system stands for. For instance, I'm doing this writing group where people are invited to write, and it's like it gets very personal. It's their narrative. You bypass the symptoms, so you go directly to their life stories, and it's like, I don't know, it's just like a confirmation of that we're doing something right. Yeah.
Very nice. Yes. So, Kristine, are you ready?
Yes, as much as I can be. Well, I have to say thank you for this incredible work that you have done with the framework. That must have taken really a lot of work. It's impressive. And, well, listening and taking everything in, I noticed that I have a lot of different roles. I have the roles of a researcher, which is a qualitative researcher, into subjective experience, and also I work as a clinical psychologist, as a psychotherapist, and now also as a team manager in this in the hospital system. Well, one of my positions is that you need to take into consideration a lot of different perspectives, and I do think that what you so clearly show is that the model that we have used to explain and describe and also to categorize mental distress or human suffering, for that, you could call it that as well. I mean, as a researcher, it's obvious the model is wrong. So all the research that you all have shown today is very important research findings. That's the obvious conclusion. And then we keep on using the same model that obviously doesn't work. And it's, like you said as well, that this is political. And I think one of the problems is that you take a theory of science and you do research and you do findings, and then the model has become a political, in a way, organizational system when the model is not valid. It has a lot or it has a really high reliability that a lot of people agree in the clinical system. It's just not valid. That's the problem. So that's like from a research point of view. Working in a hospital as a clinical psychologist, we have huge problems. We really do. I mean, we are a part of the problem, and we're also becoming victims of the problem, which is a huge problem for everyone working within the system as well. Because like that, I was really happy to read and that you say that everyone working with this really has, are really engaged into trying to help and make a difference. And now people employed in the system are getting problems themselves. Because the way the diagnostical system, using a scientific model that's meant for natural sciences into social sciences and psychology is really problematic now also for the people being objectified as workers in the health system. It used to be the patients, now it's all of us. So that's the thing. Then there's the third thing, trying to change things. Yeah. Oh my God, I mean, who have you said about, it was you about the barriers that we create within the system to change the system? Well, we made all the barriers ourselves. And now they have become objectified like the real things out there. Well, we have to change them. So, well, I could talk a long time, I realize now. But, I mean, I'll just conclude there maybe. I don't know.
It's tempting to follow up with the question, in what way I'm very happy that you are with us from the hospital, always also investigating the opportunities found in this framework. So, but do you think it's controversial that you engage in this? Because it's quite critical to model that it's built upon. Or is it encouraged even? Yeah, difficult question perhaps.
If it's controversial that I attend or a
that
part
you would
of it?
engage in this from the district psychiatric center? Or?
No, I don't think so. No, maybe if you went back some years it would be, but because the problems are becoming obvious for everyone. Everyone. And it's scary as well, the way things are developing, and it's a societal problem, it's a cultural problem. Working as a psychotherapist, then I would, that's yet another perspective that I think it overlaps a lot with the framework in so many ways, except from the society and the cultural context. And I was just thinking that doing psychotherapy is a very important cultural practice. And it's not treatment, it's psychotherapy. It's a cultural practice that has to do with relations. And I'm also one of the researchers that actually concluded after spending 4 years that relationships are important.
Yes. Rocket science.
Which is kind of eureka, yeah. No, I don't think it's very controversial anymore, but it's very complicated. This is a model. We have used a linear causal model for things that are dynamic systems of complexity, ever-changing. So no wonder the model doesn't fit, no. And then we need complicated answers to complicated questions, and we don't like that. We want simple answers, and we can't have them. Yeah.
Thank you. Ingrid?
Yes.
Please.
Thank you. I've written down a lot of what I was planning to say. I think that I've been hearing about this framework before during the recovery course at the university, and I love it. I really, really love it. I'm teaching a class in university about personality disorders, and usually when I have this class, I'm trying to, because I see that these patients, a lot of these patients, myself included, have a lot of trauma in their life. And my goal in many ways have been to make the students see that this is about trauma, and then you're having some trauma-related diagnosis in the system. And in some weird way, they're always trying to exclude these personality disorder patients from that category. So when you're trying to inform people about the trauma these patients have lived, it's like the persons who are doing this diagnostic reviews are almost intentionally excluding this patient group from that category, making it really hard. Myself, I was diagnosed with the borderline personality disorder and did a lot of self-harm, and of course I also have a trauma history with a lot of rejection in my life. So what happened is that when I met the system, I was experiencing a lot of rejection there too. And also the doctors who were nice were even very pessimistic. There were, no one was giving me any hope. It was like, this is a personality disorder, this is how your life is going to be. Maybe the self-harm will burn out, but you will always be depressed. So I lost my hope. And I got so sick that even though I experienced a lot of rejection, eventually they had no choice but to help me if I was going to survive. What happened? I was committed, tvangsinnlagt for 3 months. And what happened is that at that time, because otherwise they would just say, with your diagnosis, you are not supposed to be here, and they will kick you out. So they got to know me. And what finally helped me is the one thing that everyone said was contraindicated for my diagnosis. So I am worried about these patients because of the trauma. I would feel that they are emotional burn patients, and because of the diagnosis, you are stigmatized and you're also often rejected in the system. So I think if any group is going to benefit from what happened to you, it's these patients. And after this, I'm quite hopeful. If this is implemented in the system, these patients is going to fare a lot better, I would think. As Lucy showed about this hospital in London, where you had a 90% reduction, I think, in self-harm episodes. It shows that if these patients are treated kindly, if these patients are treated with hope, then there is really, really hope for these people. The people who have trauma need emotional care. The people who have trauma need to be seen as individuals. And today, sadly, in psychiatry, the need to be seen is seen as a symptom. And in many cases, these needs are consciously, I would say, not met. I hope this will change, because we all have basic human emotional needs, and it's not a symptom. And I hope we can embrace each other.
So I see that time is running, but I will give the word to you, Lucy. But I think just a short comment, because what I really enjoy with this framework, that it is so open and it's inviting anyone to participate, both to be inspired, but also to give back something to developing it further. So from my position, I've been engaged in open dialogue, and you mentioned it. And I think you're right, there is something that we can enrich both ways. Just a small reflection there, because a colleague of mine, Ånen Bråtveit, he has been researching open dialogue, and he puts it in a way that it's helpful for me. He said that open dialogues, when you invite the one concerned, invites those who he or she wants to be there together, talking about the problem, he says that those conversations are not conversations about life, but they are conversations in life. And he also says that it's about engaging directly in the social reality of those concerned. And that I find very interesting. And I think that might be some contribution to PTMF as a kind of PTMF practice. And for me, it's kind of, in the PTMF framework, it's about narratives, but I feel that that kind of help perhaps can make a change in the social reality directly, and it doesn't have to go via the right narrative, actually, because something is happening in that meeting, and you can move on in life together with others in new ways. So you're not dependent, actually, on making the right narrative, and then from that narrative go on to the action. So, but I think that's kind of suits very well with that. When you are met with, when life appears as threatening, you kind of detach from it and you withdraw from life. So making, through such network meetings or the center that you are offering to, it's a social world that we create that people may take a step into life again, so to speak, in new ways. So that's my one possible comment on open dialogue. So, I think I will give the word to you, Lucy, if you want it. You can comment on whatever you would like, but there has also been 3 talks after lunch. So, please, if you want it.
I will comment very briefly on the 3 sets of speakers we've just heard. Thank you, all of you. You've all picked up something very important about the framework, I think, so you were obviously listening. Well done. The first respondent, sorry, I'm so bad at names, and I'm particularly bad at Norwegian names, but you, yes.
Tor.
I mean, thank you. And you're right, it's common sense. And one of the odd things we found about the framework is that a lot of people who have said, this is really difficult and impossible to understand, and they've mostly been the academics. And a lot of people have said, this really makes sense to me immediately, and they have been the service users or survivors. So that's curious, isn't it? It's so easy to understand for service users that academics just don't get it. Okay. And the second, Christina, thank you for your comments. I mean, I think you're right. It's not only people in the system as patients or service users, it's also staff are becoming part of the problem and victims of the problem. And I guess we have to say at the same time, well, to be honest, perpetuating the problem to some extent. But although that's very depressing, it also suggests that we can stop perpetuating the problem and maybe start making small changes towards actually doing something different. So there's hope and there's frustration, of course. And I'm reminded of the story of one of the authors of the framework, Eleanor Longden, who was a survivor herself, who had years in the psychiatric system, told she had schizophrenia, would never recover. She eventually met a psychiatrist and he asked her, tell me about yourself. And she said, I'm Eleanor, I'm a schizophrenic. And he said, I don't want to hear what other people have told you about yourself, I want to hear about you. That was a turning point for her. Really powerful moment. You see those moments in the lives of a lot of survivors. Sometimes it only takes one conversation, one person, to start to create a different story. So I think that's something we can all do. And finally, Inga, thank you. I'm sorry to hear about the horrible treatment you had, and I'm even sorrier, if you like, that it's actually typical. And you may be encouraged to hear that the Royal College of Psychiatrists in the UK at the moment is debating whether to drop the personality disorder label. Wow. Now, at the same time as the framework came out, there was a consensus statement issued by and signed by a lot of professionals, psychologists, social workers, nurses, saying we need to drop the PD label and replace it with a formulation-based, trauma-informed approach. The Royal College of Psychiatrists refused to join in. Now it looks like they might be going to join in. So hope for you and hope for all of us.
Okay.
I hope you've dropped the label yourself anyway.
Yeah, I don't have it.
Good, very good. I endorse that. You don't have it.
So,
You need some questions?
yes, I think we could pick up some questions from the audience.
Yep. Should we stop talking about mental health and talk about social health instead?
I think we should hear
It
from one
could
of
be
the
addressed to
speakers.
Lucy, of course, but I think it could be addressed to
Yeah,
all of us, and
I
also
will keep quiet for the moment.
and also to Pour and Ness and Åre.
I can start.
Yep.
I'm not sure because I have moved from the discourse of health into well-being instead. So also because it's sometimes health get be colonizing life. So health is just part of life. So I'm just thinking out loud now. But I think how can we talk more about having a life and well-being, and then social well-being, mental problems can also be part of that language. But I'm moving more and more towards not using the term health, but because sometimes it's the reason is that sometimes I get into these discussions that when are we talking about health as our value, and when do we talk about health as the healthcare system? So sometimes it's kind of confusing for me in that sense. But what happens if you put the life you reason to value, and that are social, that are health, that are mental? There are many aspects of it. So, but I tend to more go to social health than mental health.
Any other want to comment on mental health versus social health?
Why choose? Why do you have to do either or? I think that you need all perspectives. Well, I'm used to saying psychological health in a way, and it goes together with social health. I don't think you can separate the two. In the same way that you are only a person if you're in relations, you're also only a person. I only have a psychological health in relationships, and you also have your relationships in a society. And then, of course, you have the other aspects of society, like you say, the welfare and economic situation, everything. But you can't. I don't think you should choose anything. I think you have to, like I said, it's a complex thing. It's a complex phenomenon, so you have to have all the complexity involved to be able to describe health, or I don't even know the health thing about I don't know. I mean, the most normal state is to suffer in some way. It is. I mean, when are you feeling well all the time? I don't know. I'm usually tired and you're worried about stuff. And I'm a lot in a neutral mood, thinking about what to have for dinner. I mean,
That's a comfort to hear. Thank you. Any other comments? I think we are now in the situation that we have questions. I think the one who have posed the question would have the best answer. But that's the way we do it now. Should we have another question?
Yep.
Yeah.
Are there any mental health problems where medications still are needed in your framework? So that's for you, Lucy.
Are there any mental health problems where medication is still needed? Try to avoid the word medication. It's not a strictly accurate description of psychiatric drugs. They're no more medication than alcohol, which may be used for similar reasons for relief of stress. I use it for that purpose myself, but it's not usually seen as a treatment. So, I mean, in the same way, and in talking about this, I'm quoting from the work of critical psychiatrist Joanna Moncrief, who some of you may have heard of, who's very well known in the UK. I think psychiatric drugs, they don't correct chemical imbalances. We know that. They do, in various ways, make feelings less overwhelming and unbearable. Now, anyone who's going through a state of extreme suffering may well benefit from drugs, ideally in the short term, in order to get through the day. I wouldn't want to deprive anyone of that relief. I would want a fully informed discussion about the disadvantage as well as the advantages. I would not want to describe that as treatment. You've already queried the word treatment. Treatment is a word I try not to use. Using drugs in that sense is not treatment, although it may have some uses, and that's not about particular health problems, because the world doesn't divide into particular health problems. There are various forms of suffering and distress. I don't know whether our resident psychiatrists would agree with that view on the use of drugs, psychiatric drugs. Is that a fair summary of a reasonable way to use psychiatric drugs?
I would agree with Lucy.
You would agree?
Yes,
yeah.
I would agree. I think that there are cases where drugs, as she says, the drugs doesn't fix anything. It doesn't cure anything. It's not a treatment. But it's like if you break a leg and you're on crutches. It's not the crutches that will heal your leg, but it will make it easier to come through the hardest times. So it will have a function, but it's not a solution.
Trond, do you want to comment?
Yes, I think that most psychiatrists would say that there are some patients who will not be able to do very well without these drugs. I don't think there are very many, but there are some who have excellent responses and actually really want to take these drugs. And of course we should continue giving it to them if they so wish. My main point is that it should be by their own choice. But people are not the same, and we don't really know how to identify beforehand those who are going to respond. But I don't see any compelling reason not to offer them to try these things if it's suitable for them, but not on a singular treatment that excludes other ways of helping.
But there's a distinction there. You said, Lucy, you don't prefer to call it medication?
No, it's not medication.
Because then you think that it's treatment for some
it's not treatment.
Specific illness, but drugs?
Yeah. Well, the names are misleading. I also try not to use the word antidepressants, but it's very hard to avoid because it's a clever piece of marketing, I think. Antidepressants, antipsychotics sounds a bit like antibiotics. We're actually addressing the root cause of your infection or condition. If you believe something is an antidepressant, of course you want to take the pill that tackles the depression. That this is a highly misleading account of how these drugs were developed and how they're sold and how they act. So I think we have to be very, very careful about describing them, and we actually need more neutral words. You know, in a sense, they're sedatives or stimulants. And if we say, should you be using sedatives or stimulants if you have a mental health problem, I think it's be clear that, well, they might have some uses, but that isn't actually part of a medical treatment regime.
We take the last question then. One could argue that diagnostic criteria are also patterns meant to make meaning of and structure a narrative. Could you comment on that, one of you?
So could you repeat that?
Yeah. One could argue that the diagnostic criteria are also patterns meant to make meaning of and structure a narrative.
Yeah, they're meant to, but they don't. But let's see if other people want to comment on that. I mean, I would strongly dispute that diagnostic criteria or diagnostic labels in psychiatry identify patterns. They don't. I was pleased to see you quote our everything's thing, Trond. Everything causes everything, everybody suffers from everything, everyone's experienced everything. In a sense, everything helps everything or doesn't help everything. It's because, and the root of that problem is that diagnoses do not identify patterns in the way they were hoped to do or in the way in which they still claim to do. But other people may have thoughts.
Well, they do create a very efficient narrative, it's just not valid.
Yeah.
Well, that is the problem, though.
Yeah,
I mean, it is very efficient.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I like the narrative myself. I wish it was true sometimes that we could find the single cause. But it's not true.
No.
So.
Never will be true.
No, probably not. We need a different model.
Okay.
Just Alan, you have been thinking there on the, how do you say it, right? Left wing. You had this really stunning example of giving, speaking of medication or drugs, you give them money and the outcome is quite stunning.
No, I had many thoughts listening to you. Two shortly. The first, Christina, you were talking about the medicalization, and I've been writing about it. And when you talked, I started to think, and I was thinking that the problem is not medicalization, it's the industrialization of psychiatry. When you talk about the victims, are also the doctors, the psychologists. Yeah, we are the victims of industrialization, where production is the central aspect of the doing. So we have to follow rules, routines, and so because we have to show that we've been doing something, even if it doesn't help. The second thing, very shortly, about social health. I learn a lot from Italian colleagues, and they are so different in their thinking about life and us. And they teach me one thing, is life is about managing the contradiction. We have been talking about hope, the importance of hope. But if you start to hope, then you become very sårbar. Vulnerable, because hope is dangerous. So you have to manage this contradiction. Or if you fell in love, you know it will break your heart. But it's so nice to be in love. So you have to manage the contradiction. And this is life. This is not health or not health or social or something. It's just managing the contradiction is life. And sometimes we try to kill the contradiction and solve them. It doesn't work.
Lucy, I'm sorry, but I hope it's okay that I finish with in Norwegian.
Please do.
Da skal vi kort oppsummere, Tordag. Hva vil du si om dagen?
Ja, den er jo inhabil, men den er fantastisk da. Fantastisk.
Det holder det.
Og jeg synes jo til og med den siste bolken her, jeg klarte ikke å ødelegge den en gang, altså, så da er det bra.
Ja, alle dere som har vært på scenen vil få en gave. Det er en bok, og så er jeg veldig i tvil, for de har pakket den inn, så jeg kan ikke si hvordan bok det er, men jeg tror det er en god bok. Og så vil jeg få lov å takke dere som har fulgt dette programmet i opptak. Vi har jo spilt inn, og vi kommer til å legge det ut. Så tusen takk for at dere fulgte med. Selv om dere ikke var her hos oss på KRS Live, så var det hyggelig at dere likevel har sett dette programmet. Vi lar det være siste ord fra scenen i dag. Takk skal dere ha alle sammen, og dere som kommer langveis fra, ha en trygg og god hjemreise, og ta vare på hverandre. Sola skinner. Takk for oss. Ha en fin dag.